All right. Welcome, everybody. It's November the 9th. This is week 7 of EOS Independence. Today, we've got a special edition call. We're going to be talking about peer-to-peer improvements. We've got a demo also, should be a short one then your name, it just is escaping me now. It's Jeff. Thank you. Jeff is going to be doing a quick demo on Antelope Coalition prioritization. And before we get into that, we can just quickly check in, shouldn't take long, on software release updates. So last week, we got the update that LEAP 3.1.3 patch is out, LEAP 3.2.0 RC2 is out, and still expected on the way, CDT 3.1, system contracts, and DUNE, perhaps a little further down the road. Anything to report there, Stephen?
Yeah, so we do have an update. We released RC1 of CDT yesterday evening. I just dropped the release notes there. Really, what it involves is there's a little bit of an update around how data segment partitioning is taking place. But the big thing that's in this release is just some of the remaining crypto extensions that we were hoping to get into the original release of CDT, that being 3.0.0 inside of the new org. So that's a lot of what's going on inside of that release. As far as any of the other releases go, of course, the most recent RC for LEAP is still RC2. And I think that we are still on track within the next month or so to have a DUNE release. The timeline of that, we've really not nailed down just yet. We're really just kind of trying to tidy up a couple of things. Most notably, what we want to get out in that next release is removing the versioning dependency that's inside of DUNE. Those of you who have interacted with it know that it's dependent upon hard-coded versions of CDT and LEAP. So just working to get some of that stuff tidied up and resolved in time. The only other thing I wanted to bring to this segment of the discussion is I did want to circle back on just where we've got eyeballs testing out some of the code that we've been releasing incrementally, just to make sure that we're covering our bases. I know we were very deliberate about this with the upcoming consensus upgrade that we had previously back in, I guess, September timeline. But there are a couple areas where there have been changes within LEAP across this 3.2 release that we'd like a little bit more attention. And after discussing with the team, the two primary areas are SHIP and our HTTP protocol for cleos. So with regards to SHIP, there's a number of backports that were integrated into the RC1 release. And I think that we just like people poking around, testing SHIP, making sure that there's nothing that jumps out at people. There are actually, I think, a few fixes that we've already made here recently. And then I also know that we upgraded to, I guess, HTTP 1.1 for cleos. And I think this was just related to some errors that were being thrown in certain cloud stacks. But those are the two main areas that I'm aware of. I also see that Kevin flipped his camera on, so maybe he has a bit more color to add as well.
No, just realized I didn't have my camera on.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I always appreciate.
I'm curious on that. Is like on the SHIP stuff, would that be in relation to like a full replay or native 3.2 SHIP logs, like resynced and built from scratch, versus, most of us are taking these SHIP logs and just snapshotting them forward. But the original logs are still, I think, in the old format. So a little clarification on that. I'm curious.
Yeah, that's fine. The changes in the SHIP that, probably need some testing is just the fact that it's multi-threaded now. And so there's some enhancements along those vectors in terms of like its capabilities. So just making sure that, it didn't introduce any bugs. There was one already that was discovered in RC1 that has been fixed. And so, there might be.
Was that the one I think Aloha picked up on? I know they had something with ship.
I can't remember who reported it.
Anyway,
we reported a bug with backups or shutdown not working correctly with ship.
Oh,
Right, that has been fixed.
And it may have been 3.1.2 that they were fighting some issues, but anyway, separate thing. But it's not like the V1 or VO V1. At one point, there was a weird shift in the way ship and the original version versus the new version. So it doesn't really matter if we just upgrade our nodes to 3.2 RC, even if the ship was synced and built off of 2.0, really.
Yeah, it should all work. Now, obviously, if it doesn't, that's what we're
correct. It's getting it because we'll test it and then be like, oh, well, I didn't replay the whole 200 million block chain. I didn't realize that's what it would take to trigger it. So
yeah, no, we're hopefully that's not going to be necessary. So yes, hopefully it should just work.
Should just work. That's a dev response.
Unmute myself there. Ship backports and HTTP. Anything else I could add there to this bullet point to make that more clear?
V1.1, I think, is what he said, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
or cleos.
Yeah, we have
cleos.
Yeah, we have a complete new implementation of the HTTP plugin within the 3.2, and so getting some testing around that. Just make sure that there isn't any strangeness when you're hitting any of the API.
Is that on the HTTP API side of it, or I heard him say something about cleos?
Well, it's both sides, but probably the server, the API endpoints is probably the area where there might be.
Then, yeah, maybe not for cleos, Daniel, than for the API.
Well, including cleos. It's used in both.
Slash them. Just what the test, right? We're testing cleos. We're testing also there may be some HTTP API changes in itself, just like ship. So
yeah, just like if you notice for whatever reason that your proxy is acting strangely with it, or I don't know, whatever it might be, the type of issues.
I don't know. Matthew makes me use HTTP 2, I think. So I don't even know.
Yeah, the only thing that we noticed, which was already fixed, was that the 404 error messages came back as plain text instead of JSON. So that's already been fixed in RC2.
That's right.
The validator picked up that error. The validator checks that it returns a proper error message when you generate an invalid URL. So
yeah, it gets cranky. I love it.
It's very cranky. It's very opinionated about what it likes. So it was good in this case. It found a difference.
It's good in every case, Matthew.
Yeah, we just
someone's got to be cranky.
We just discovered yesterday while working on a task for 4.0 that we're not actually handling the 1.1 spec exactly correctly. And so I'm curious that no one's actually ran into that. So that's part of like, hey, does anybody actually notice? But we're working on a fix for that, but that's currently not even in there. But it's curious whether anyone even notices that. I think in general, clients of HTTP are fairly forgiving of not exactly adhering to the spec, and so hopefully it's not really an issue.
Okay. Anything else on the topic of CDT 3. I guess is this CDT? Am I talking about the right thing? Yes.
Sorry, actually, no. Both of those things are focused on the LEAP release. I was just kind of circling back and clarifying. We wanted eyeballs on the stuff that's gone out over the last couple of weeks.
Got it. So this is correct CDT release, but these comments here are related to
LEAP 3.2.
LEAP 3.1. Okay, 3.2. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. The versions, especially since we're in 3. Different numbers, it's just going to be fun times.
You guys do get version numbers and how they kind of correlate, right? Or how sysadmins expect them to line up.
It's probably only going to get weirder, guys. But we will be very deliberate in why we separate the versions across these various things. But we also don't want to do hand wavy stuff like bump a major version across everything, just because one thing has a meaningful update, I guess.
Got it. Cool. Anything else on that topic?
Only other thing I'll mention is that we are working on a document to actually catalog and outline how the crypto extensions that we've released across the last two versions of CDT can be utilized. And I'm happy to share that with this group once I have it. We didn't have it for this release specifically, but since we've had a couple of waves of releases there, it's justified pulling together some materials there. And I think some people will find it interesting.
Great. That's the crypto primitives, right?
So it's the crypto extensions inside of CDT to utilize the crypto primitive host functions. Yeah.
Sorry, that was me.
Did I get that right?
You can put host in between primitive and functions.
Thank you.
I think that's what we want. Yeah. And then no other updates right now for system contract or DUNE. We anticipate those releases taking place, but they're not urgent compared to the other stuff that we're tackling at the moment.
Great. Okay, and then perhaps we can move on then to Jeff, if you're ready to share your short demo on the Antelope stuff. We can start there, and then after that, move on to a discussion on peer-to-peer. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and the floor is yours, Jeff.
Yeah, actually, I'm having a small bit of technical difficulty. Can we swap the topics and do the P2P peer discussion first?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. We can do that.
Reboot.
What's that, Michael? Will do?
I said reboot.
Reboot. There you go. Did you try turning it off and on? Okay. How
That's
would
what I
you
always
guys
say.
like? It usually does the trick.
Absolutely.
So I've got there was a document, I guess the RFP that was put out. Is that a good place to start, or how would we like to frame this conversation?
I mean, I guess it depends on which RFP, but
yeah. So I think maybe the best way to dive into this is maybe I can give us a quick primer and then we can open up to discussion, just because there's a little bit of a historical arc to all of this, at least since I've been part of the ENF, and I think it paints a clearer picture of how we've gotten to where we are. So if you guys will put up with me for like 5 minutes, I'll talk about kind of where we started and where we're going from here. So first and foremost, I think everybody's familiar with the P2P protocol and the entire like syncing process. This is something that is code that's been around, I think since like the introduction of EOSIO. And historically, there's been kind of some complaints lobbed at it here and there around its performance and its stability and its user friendliness. I know there have been some changes made in the past, even by people on this call, to help make aspects of it more performant by making it multi-threaded, but a lot of just how peers are appropriately managed, as well as just any sort of internal configuration settings that somebody may set for net plugin and related pieces of the software have been pretty feature limited to date. Also, just the experience of actually like locating and connecting to peers is not a user-friendly process to date. And in the summation of all of that, the Antelope Coalition sought to vote up improvements to the P2P syncing process as a priority. And back in, I guess it was May or so, we collaborated closely with OCI to kind of develop some pretty advanced requirements there that were pretty far-reaching in scope. They touched on things like the peer node discovery process, a lot of like those net plugin improvements that I think may be of interest to the people on this call, as well as even further flung opportunities such as swarm downloading to really make it more efficient in terms of keeping the entire network better in state with itself. That RFP kind of proved to be a little too big of a chunk to bite off at once. And as a result of that, we kind of went back to the drawing board. And what I can do right quick is I'll drop that first link for the RFP just for everyone's awareness. Whenever we publish a new RFP, if you're not already aware, it is accessible inside of the Coalition RFPs subdirectory inside of the EOS Network Foundation organization. We've been historically uploading these as PDFs, and the entire process by which you can actually like bid on and interact with us is outlined in these documents. Since we went back to the drawing board, we decided to slim down the scope so that we could actually deliver something that the coalition felt comfortable with from a timeline and cost perspective based off the different priorities that we were attempting to balance. And one of those bite-sized chunks that was identified was the peer node discovery process. Since that time, a separate RFP has been published, which I'm linking here right now. That's a consolidated document, or I'm sorry, it's a kind of scope cut back document that's focused just around that peer discovery process. That's what we've officially submitted as of Monday for people to submit their intent to bid. And inside of this RFP doc itself, there's been a few updates to the requirements in terms of the bidding process itself. That stuff we don't really need to go into today, but if anyone has any questions, you can, of course, contact people at the ENF and we can give you the clarity that you may be seeking there. Where this has left us is that, of course, we're addressing this peer discovery aspect of P2P, but it doesn't directly acknowledge a lot of those improvements that we could actually make to net plugin. And I know that part of why we did this whole separation is that we actually tried to keep the peer discovery process and the improvements related to it as minimally invasive to net plugin as possible. There's a few areas where I think we're going to inevitably have a little bit of need to do a few changes there, but the entire idea was like, can we ship this thing that's kind of standalone, having value and on a much shorter timeline, while simultaneously we're trying to build a better understanding of those net plugin improvements that we believe at this time we can accomplish incrementally. And some of those things may become RFPs themselves in time, and some of them may actually just be ingested by the ENF internally inside of like our actual like agile methodologies that we execute every couple of weeks. Where that's led us is we've had a couple of discussions internally around what we think is important in terms of the net plugin improvements. And I think that that's what the purpose of this discussion will be today, is to kind of continue to expand those use cases. But I think some of the high level bullet points that we've identified as opportunities are this concept of a block buffer, or what we've kind of referred to in the past as a fork cache, just to better manage like some locus of state, as well as like maybe some blocks that have come too early to that node, so that we're not just like blindly and needlessly throwing away data that we may be able to utilize and not need to re-request in the future. I think that at this time, we believe that that's like the biggest bang for our buck. Then moving on to a little bit more configurability of one's peer, just in terms of the number of connection counts that are available, as well as the bandwidth utilization. And then the third big chunk that I think that we've identified is just management of those connected peers when they're performing like known undesirable or maybe even malicious behavior that's not adding value in terms of us performing requests to that peer. So I think that that's a lot of like where we started and where we're headed. And I didn't really touch on some of the pieces that were in the original RFP related to swarm downloading, just because those things I think are even a further evolution past what we're seeking to address right now. So that I think that that's kind of a general summary of where we're at. And then before I turn it over to questions, one piece of awareness that I'll just share with everyone on the call is that we actually have an additional product person on the call today from the ENF in the form of Brian Hazard. Brian has worked in and around EOSIO and Antelope in different capacities at Block 1 and Voice historically. And he's joining us this week. And I believe that he'll have some closer focus specifically around groups like BPs, exchanges, and token holders to a capacity. So he'll be part of this discussion actively. You just hear me talking today because he's a 3-year-old baby and he's going to be a baby genius by as soon as next week. But just wanted to give you guys that awareness, that name, that face, because of course, he'll be talking to you guys a good bit more, and we'll be working together closely as a team to really start wrangling a number of these initiatives. So I guess I'll open up to questions after I dumped all that context, and then I guess we can discuss.
I'll let somebody else talk so Roth doesn't get mad at me.
For those interested in bidding on these RFPs, to be clear, this original one is not, should we kind of put that on the back burner? This is really the new one is the one we should be focused on. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. And I apologize if I added any confusion there. So if you look at the structure of like the actual sequence of events for both of these RFPs, the original RFP that I shared, those sequences of events have already come to pass, and there's no longer a window to bid on that larger RFP. We've since done a revision and introduced this newer, smaller RFP. I was kind of trying to tell the story because I guess I have this awareness that peer discovery and management is perhaps less critical to some of the people on this call, just because my understanding is that a lot of the BPs will already have a list of peers that they wish to connect to and interact with.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, we have a lot of
statically
set up. Yeah. But for a developer just spinning up a node, it'd be great if it just went out and discovered a whole lot of peers just to get synced up,
Exactly.
Correct.
So that's why we believe that this does have value and is worth pursuing as an RFP. And why we're discussing the net plugin improvements, because I think that that's more of the juice for the squeeze for the people who are on the call today, basically.
Correct. And it kind of came up just because, as the coalition loops back around and, starts, all right, I hear you guys screaming about peer-to-peer, and then sees, either one version or second version of the proposal and whatnot, they don't really, that just kind of like y'all are, I don't know, y'all keep screaming peer-to-peer, but there's so many different aspects. So that had, at least in one scenario, I think, kind of gotten lumped in as the replacement for, hey, y'all have been screaming, this is what you want, right? Yeah, no, we want it. I mean, it's a valid piece, but it wasn't exactly, just kind of clarifying the nerds kind of, yeah, that's great. We don't have to deal with all of that anymore, but, it's still inefficient. It's still, has a lot to be, they could probably be fine-tuned. And now it really starts to, in my opinion, bleed heavily into other initiatives like the trimming of logs and, even overall infrastructure, like we talked about, stacking nodes, and does every node really have to have everything? Or down the road, can it be much more, administration friendly, load friendly type of thing? So that's kind of how, at least I got to him this path to bring it up.
Right. And I think that that's kind of the idea of like this first stage of what I'm referring to, and we may change the name of this over time, as net plugin incremental improvements. I think this idea of a block buffer, as we've been calling it, is kind of alluding to what you're thinking of in terms of just alleviating some of the pain around how some of these different things are being managed. I can't act like I'm too much of a SME beyond the degree to which I've expressed so far, but I did just want to share that awareness that peer discovery, I think, is adding value for other groups, maybe a bit more so than the BPs directly. And that's why we're kind of trying to have this conversation of why not both, pursuant of this RFP, while also addressing these incremental improvements that we can tackle by collecting these requirements via discussion today.
Yeah. And I, even as painful as it is on peer-to-peer, might venture to say this might be probably one of the most important, because it affects way more people. We know how to fight our battles. I just rip on Ross's nose and sink them hard. But yeah, like for instance, we know as VPs, set one peer local, or as local as close as you can get, because you would think two peers is better. Nope, you just ask the same people twice. or you ask two different people the same question. And that may be, in that Fort database or some of that, and better handling of that quagmire of data. But yeah, there's lots and lots of pieces of it, and even probably gets down into some of the, I don't know, subjective billing or I'm not so sure people aren't smashing my peer-to-peer nodes with, like you talked about, undesirable whatevers.
Yeah, let me add a little bit there. I think you somewhat addressed it by talking about the fact that, as someone that's been around for a long time, has used the net plugin a long time, that it's better to put one peer that is good than what most people think is the good thing to do, which is go to some website, get as many peers as you can find, and put it in your config, thinking the more
first finding that damn website of those peers, and then hoping to God they have the blocks you're looking for, because you're going to keep asking them over and over and over and over and over.
Right. And so that is an anti-pattern, right? But people don't. Like, everyone needs to explain that. So instead, I think one of the things that we'd like to do is let a node make that determination. Because one of the problems right now with the net plugin is it has no memory. So like it just simply does round robin between all the nodes that it has. And it'll ask a node for a set of blocks. And if it doesn't have it, like, it takes it a little bit to figure that out, and it'll go to the next node. But the next time around, it'll do it again. Like, it doesn't have any memory of anything. There's no like state that's maintained about, did this thing have the block range that I care about? Yes or no? What's the latency between me and this other node? Maybe I should go to things that have better latency than this set, because these are crap nodes, and I should realize that and skip it. Right? So there's a little bit of state that we can maintain, a little bit of some heuristics that would greatly improve that whole thing, that whole procedure. Basically, just maintain a bit of state, which we currently just do not do. So that's the sort of thing I think that we would hopefully try to address in some of these incremental improvements.
Like a routing table, open shortest path first type thing. What is the shortest path to get the blocks? Some little state table.
Networking guys call that network. So would that be like another, I don't know, following revision? Okay, now we've done this RFP, we've kind of moved past criticality number one. Let's then move to almost a subset of these net features that we're trying to kind of identify. And I think maybe everybody would agree, peer discovery for developers. Corbin, I'm sure, had a hell of a time coming in blind and being like, where do I sync? He wasn't here from the very beginning to know everybody, right? So that's definitely number one. I don't want to hamper, we don't want to hamper any developers. But number two, would you then, down this same path, just keep kind of pursuing this cool, we've knocked that one hopefully off the list, or at least the gears are going, and then put another RFP out to try to tackle maybe the state of peer-to-peer and tackling that inefficiency. And then, okay, cool, we've got an idea with that, and then moving to the next phase. Is that kind of how you're envisioning this whole net plugin micro features?
So the way I see it today, and this may change over time, is that we've made a decision via the Antelope Coalition to pick this RFP and vote on it to move it into action. So we've agreed that peer discovery is a priority.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've identified as an opportunity is to address these net plugin incremental improvements. These are things that we believe the ENF can ingest internally. The capacity to which we actually commit to and take action against that is still to be determined. And we're at the phase right now where we're really defining the requirements so that we can justify and prioritize those items appropriately. But strategically, the idea around the peer discovery initiative was to keep it minimally invasive in its relation to net plugin so that these things could possibly happen in parallel. There's been no commitment on development of any of these things yet, since nobody has won the bid for peer discovery. And of course, we're still in the requirements gathering stage for net plugin. But we do believe that all of these things are important. And that's why we're working to define them right now. So there is a committed interest to gather these requirements and justify building these solutions. We're just not at that stage yet. So kind of political answer, but I hope it is close enough.
Yeah, so we're defining subtask 2, 3, 4, 5 for the net plugin feature enhancements. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I'm excited about it. I know, yes, peer-to-peer, inefficiency, ask over and over, not have a clue going on along that line. Also, the fact that, and maybe this ties in with it, that you can't, if you run a peer-to-peer node, you either have, no blocks really, or all the blocks. And damn, that's, a pretty big decisive, difference between the two of them now on a lot of different chains. So I might put in there, further down the initiative list I'm just thinking of a spreadsheet or project board, whatever, requirements further down, to make, as a provider, it more efficient to be able to serve the chain, but maybe, have a downstream, even if it's a 301 or something, I don't know how peer-to-peer might handle it, but to help people, fine, you get my node. No, I don't have that, but this node does, be it internal or be it even external. I'll throw all my traffic at Ross.
Hey, when I first read the RFP, it was kind of open to some interpretation because it wasn't necessarily built off the back of one of these kind of conversations. And last week we said that we need to have a kind of conversation to further articulate what exactly the ask is. Just for my understanding, where is the RFP? Has someone already bidded and is about to do the work? And then there would need to be a conversation about what it is that they're actually going to be doing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, so the status right now, and you can reference the document link there because it outlines all the steps. But basically, when we submit the RFP to the community, there's a week to submit intent to bid. And after that, the window is closed for people to bid on it. But there's a kind of correspondence segment thereafter where we clarify the scope and best equip the bidders to provide the highest quality response that they're capable of to just increase their opportunity at successfully winning the bid. So happy to clarify that further, but technically this window is still open. And this is kind of the pattern, is that we'll be talking about the RFP coming together. We'll submit it typically on a Monday, and we'll give around a week or so time to submit the intent to bid. The bidding process thereafter is a bit different. I'm not the owner of these sequences in totality, but the other thing that I can mention as a detail is that there's, of course, exception cases here wherein, if there's only one bidder, some of the follow-on processes may be expedited because it's a direct engagement, and it's whether that person wins the bid or not versus whether or not like one person wins a bid over another person. So I hope that that's giving some clarity.
So right now the scope, even though we've got like a frame, I mean, there's a direction about what needs to happen. The actual scope of work that needs to be completed is still kind of open.
No,
I don't know. I mean, I was going to ask and say the requirements are defined.
Let me interrupt here a little bit. This RFP has an exact scope in it. We're talking to you because there will be follow-on RFPs. This RFP is half the size of the previous RFP and has half the scope of the original RFP for P2P. So we reduce the scope in order to get the price down, in order to make more competitive bids. We have 2 teams that have already indicated they will bid on this reduced scope RFP. But why do we want to talk to you and get your input? Well, in the old days, Block 1 wouldn't do that because they didn't want to admit they had anything to do with EOS mainnet. We've now got 2 product managers on board. We want to encourage the community to start giving feedback. I saw you were very interested a couple of weeks ago, Michael, and that's why we thought, yeah, let's get Ross and Corbin on the call. Let's hear more. We're going to capture that feedback about the things you would like to see in P2P or, in block log splitting. That's why we're doing these calls, because our roadmap goes on in perpetuity. And so maybe we won't deliver in this RFP what you're looking for, because this is most about peer-to-peer discovery. And maybe there'll be some enhancements on peer-to-peer discovery that can come in a follow-on release, or we could even, discuss with the winner of the bid. But there's things like the part we took out of the previous RFP was the swarm download part. But there might be whole topics on P2P that just aren't even covered in the original. If you read the original, which was mostly what this is plus swarm download, or not, not even covered in just this peer discovery portion of this one. So because there will be follow-on, because likely we will engage whoever wins the contract to do some maintenance work at a time and material level afterwards. Let's say we missed something in this, but we get enough good feedback from all of you on just the peer discovery. We say to the team that won the bid, that rewrites it, we say, hey, on a time and material basis, the coalition, or even maybe just the ENF, is willing to pay for these 2 enhancements to be done. So that's why we're really talking to you. We want to hear like, hey, did we miss the mark? Like, hey, we had a bunch of people that had contributed to what should be in this, but we didn't have you. So now we want to drive a much more inclusive process where we're reaching out to you, and hopefully that'll drive more people that want to come to this call because they start to realize, hey, I get a voice.
I appreciate what you're saying, Ted, and I totally get it. But I'll give you 2 examples. I mean, when I first looked at it was more of the RFP was presented to me as, look at this RFP, can you review it? And I reviewed it as from an RFP creation side, not a response side. And I know you say that
that wasn't the goal. So
no, I know. Sorry, this was about a month ago. Yeah, came up
because that was not the request.
Yes, and I get that. I do understand that, but this was about a month ago. Yeah, and I know you say that this is pretty locked down, but I mean, I'll give you 2 examples of something that makes it open to interpretation. The first one is somewhere written here. It says we want to reduce the amount of steps that it takes in order to do a peer-to-peer session, or it's something on that kind of language. It's written here. So what does that mean? Does that mean that if there are 7 steps and now there's 6 steps, is that a tick in the box? Another thing was it has to be backwards compatible. Does that mean that it has to run in the same plugin function? Or could it be another function that could run at the same time and they're both running on the same Node.js node? So, hey,
what it means is
compatible.
you would be able to still talk with nodes that have not upgraded until all the nodes had upgraded.
Okay. It didn't specifically say that inside of the RFP. Look,
Right.
I'm not here to poke things. I was looking at it from a perspective, probably need to be a little bit more clear if someone's got to come back with a fixed price.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
first.
maybe,
and that's
maybe
where
in
I
the
was coming from.
future, now that we have you guys and we're starting to engage you a little more deeply, we'll involve you before we issue the RFP. This RFP was issued by the time you guys were kind of looking at it or was agreed to. So what we will do moving forward, that's why we're starting to collect feedback from you now. Yeah. And then what we'll do is we'll work with you guys before we issue the next RFP to say, okay, here we go. We're about to, this is the rough draft of it. Give us feedback where you think the wording is too loose or too ambiguous, and we'll tighten it. We don't believe we're at perfection or even close to it. We're just hoping that each iteration we get better and better, and your feedback and your input will help us do that. So that's really the goal, is to listen to you guys now, start to, collate all of the information that you're providing back to us, make the process changes. Like you're pointing out, we need a process change. I agree with you. We'll do that. We also, though, want your requirements inbound. But then when we write the RFP, we now have a larger group of people that can give feedback of this section's too ambiguous. This requirement, this technical requirement or business requirement is too ambiguous as to how you would achieve it. And we'll tighten those things down. So thank you for that input. This is what we're kind of looking for. And we will promise you we'll be better on the next iteration.
And Ted, I hope you understand that I'm all for everything that you're doing. I don't even have a bad thing to say about any of it. It is just part of a discussion. That's all.
No, I'm saying thank you. Thank you for this feedback, because this will make us better. I mean, we're all kind of new at this as well, and we're working kind of quickly with actually still pretty small teams. And in terms of Stephen is was a part-time product manager, so he was doing maybe 20 or 25% of his job was to kind of help on these things. So, but we brought Brian on now. We're trying to free Stephen up, and these will just continue to get better, and the process needs to get better. And so I do really appreciate and thank you for that feedback, and we will use it and we will improve.
Cool.
And to be fair to the process, there is this question, section, submit your intent to bid. That's easy. Send an email saying, I'm interested.
Yeah. You're in.
And now you've got some time to collect some questions, and which answers to those questions will be published publicly for everyone. And
of course, I never read that.
I was going to add that color. And then the only other thing I'd say is just, it's always going to be a little bit of a tug of war game with us kind of over prescribing a solution in the RFP itself versus really starting with the problem. And we, as product people who are authoring the requirements here, we want to communicate what we believe is directionally like the problems we're trying to solve. And we want the respondents to really give us a solution. So just taking the example of like reducing the number of steps, well, we believe that directionally that's a place where we can improve, but a solution that only reduces one step may actually in totality be a better solution than one that like cuts down way more steps, but is a less eloquent solution, right? So we want to give you guys directions and like the right sandbox to play in as respondents, and we'll tune it to get more specific over time where it needs to be. But there will also be a desire from at least the product side of the house to keep it a little bit open so that, engineers can do what they do best, which is come up with amazing ways to solve user problems with technology. So it's always going to be a little bit of some dynamic there. But I think we were talking about net plugin, right?
Yeah, I guess we should take it back to there.
Well, I mean, like I say, I think it starts on that. I mean, I personally think, I mean, it's a good start. It may not be the perfect thing, lessons learned or whatever, but I think everybody kind of agrees discovery for general folk might be something quicker and easier to be able to bite off, chew, and make things better. Is the, I don't want to say intent of this, but is one of the topics we want to talk on what maybe the second or third or fourth next RFP parallel, whatever. I mean, and yes, maybe we'll be a little more interactive in defining the scope and what is backwards compatible versus whatever. But
so maybe that's a good segue back to the overall process of prioritization and driving into RFPs. Is that where you're going?
That seems to be where we're kind of heading, right? I mean, let's get on, let's talk about it, let's engage, let's do whatever. Okay, I'm envisioning that Stephen or somebody's jotting these down, kind of, all right, this was one thing. Way further down the list, EOSIO kept babbling, and this was option Z.
Sure. So let me start. Like, you all know this, but it's important to restate, is that we have coalition or Antelope prioritization, and then we have like ours, like, the EOS, right? Our priorities. And the coalition is attempting to find commonalities between us, Telos, WAX, and UX, right? So we can distribute the cost kind of, and we all get the benefits. It's important to keep that in the back of your mind, because if we go through the coalition priorities and the coalition doesn't choose to put something up there that this audience thinks is important, it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means we would do it independently of the coalition, and we would do it, directly. And so kind of with that in mind, if you imagine each chain has their different communities, and they all have different mechanisms of how they're tracking their priorities. I think Stephen would give, a much better clarity on how our chain is tracking our priorities. But what I will do is kind of pick up from the idea of, okay, we have that. How does that get weighed in with the coalition, and how do they prioritize? So kind of that's what I'll show you guys now. Let me, could somebody allow me to share my screen?
Should be good now.
No, you got to play Pictionary. Tell us about it.
Okay, so imagine two words. No. All right, where's my? There we go. All right. So first thing I'll say is we've done this twice, and we've changed it. We've improved it this time, and we already have ways we're going to improve this for the next round. So I'm going to give you a general overview, but this is already going to change a little bit for next time. The intent is every quarter that all of the chains essentially submit ideas, and they can submit up to 5 ideas or issues that they want as candidates to vote on. The reason why we start there is because you guys can see these are from the blue papers that were published, a long time ago. And then there's some ad hoc ones down at the bottom. We learned the last time that even with a list of half of this, it was just too frustrating to get everybody into one place. And so what each chain does is say, all right, we're just going to pick our top 5. And so Eve will represent our community and come back and say, all right, here are the 5 that EOS wants to put up as this quarter's nomination. I want to emphasize the quarter cadence, because honestly, that's still a little faster than this community can build and deploy stuff. I think we're all getting better at that, which is great. We're going to keep pushing at that, but we'd rather have a backlog of knowing what our next priority is than ever be, stuck with engineers out of work and not doing stuff, right? So if the priority that Eve puts up this quarter, like if you as an individual think something else should be prioritized, well, just wait 3 months, talk to Eve or, Stephen or Brian, and then help our community change our priorities. So here you can see they just go in, they add like X's to the ones they want to vote. The way this thing's set up, it's just, it changes the number at the top and they can, so once they all get to 5, then what my team did is we took anything with an X on it. We created a new spreadsheet and said, all right, here's all of the proposed ideas for this quarter. And then what happened is, so in this case, we had 16 items. And so we just said, all right, every chain has 16 votes. And we did it this way instead of just prioritizing, because if you just rank order, you're not really expressing how much more important number 1 is over number 2. But if you have 16 votes, you can now like spread them out and say, well, number 1 is really important, so I'm going to give it 8 votes. And then I'm going to take my other 8 votes and spread that out. And you can kind of see that here in some examples. And then that gets up to the, each chain does their 16 votes. And then we totaled that up at the end. And that's how we ended up with, in this case, 4 RFPs that are going out. Any questions on that?
No, not questions. Kind of good to see the whole process as VPs on. We're on all 4 of the coalition chains. So, like I say, it's kind of our voice. Hell, I can skew this vote pretty heavily. Just voted on all of them, but
you could. Yeah, right.
The way it kind of came, and part of while we're figuring it out, like Wax. Obviously they have their core team and their initiatives and what they're, obviously paying and working towards seeing. But they then reached out to the BPs, from the technical side and said, here's the list of all the initiatives. Oh my God, and tried to get some feedback. And of course it was, archaic and technical, mumbo jumbo all over the place. And what it kind of transposed back as, oh, okay, cool, let's trim it, let's slice it, whatever. But what we kept saying, hey, peer-to-peer as a BP, they kind of wouldn't know, well, is this the RFP you're talking about? And we're like, no, it's a good one, but nope. So, it's an interesting, some chains like Telos, all of those guys, we're BPs over there too, but they don't really have to go out and ask the BPs, technically what's needed. They'll tell you from a pretty hands-on experience versus like Wax, who has really no clue and will go out and ask the same people. But then to see how it kind of transposed across and whatever, but now also seeing that, all right, I know who to tell what and just keep getting more votes. Or is it better, maybe because y'all have not tracks, what are they called? The different initiatives or whatever. Maybe there is all right, we want this to kind of be an infrastructure BP slot for one of the 5 votes or something like that, right? Maybe some clarification to give them more of all right, y'all come to a consensus and figure out what our VPs want to say. And each chain can do it differently, but it was just interesting to see, there's still that discombobulation because they don't do infrastructure. They let the BPs do it, but they're the ones that, have the highest priority and they wanted to make sure. They were trying to do the right thing, right? Hey, Lucas is, here's the list, guys. What do you want me to vote for?
Why don't we talk a bit, obviously the peer-to-peer discovery, we love it. Even though not all the BPs would use it, it's definitely something that's going to help everybody spin up a node and get things going. Maybe we should talk about some of the other features that we feel, some of the other optimizations. Kevin, from my perspective, you could lead where you saw some of the flaws. I know you mentioned something already.
And
You know,
before
maybe
we
we
get
could
to,
just
I'm just going to raise. We're coming up on the hour. 5 minutes
Okay.
left on the scheduled time. Not sure how folks are. If anyone has any hard stops, I do.
Yeah.
Have we scratched the surface on the peer-to-peer feedback that you were hoping to get, Stephen and Ted? Or do we need to put this back on the agenda for next week? Or is there anything that we can get in the next 5 minutes that would get you closer to what you guys are looking for?
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say that I think the purpose for discussing with this group is focused on those net plugin oriented enhancements that we haven't really dug deep into yet. With the peer discovery P2P oriented stuff, like we've submitted that RFP to the public already. So I think feedback there is valuable, but the thing that I think is most important with this group is those net plugin incremental enhancements, as I've been referring to, in which I don't think we really covered it much today, and there's probably an opportunity to discuss further at a later date.
I agree. And I think that would be, if people want to come back next week and we make that kind of a piece of the focus, and we can go into, and really what we're going to ask you to do, it's not as much about reviewing this RFP. It's about giving us your forward-looking requirements that you'd like to see in the next, add-ons after this RFP was done, like additional requirements for net plugin type of enhancements. If people feel like, hey, that's not urgent, we can wait a while. But if you guys are willing to join next week, I think that would be good for Stephen and Brian to hear that. But it's up to you guys.
Maybe if we put a few ideas down inside the channel, that way everybody knows what we're going to kind of talk about, so they kind of get their mind percolating before we can come and have a discussion, rather than sit down and everyone say, okay, what are we going to do today? Have some kind of preemptive.
I would maybe almost try to, on the next one, say, if you want to show up, show up to do whatever, but try to have what your version of, the next 5 net peer-to-peer feature requests would be. Knowing some of them these are just really, really wannabes way down the road, but then start to kind of collapse into an overall list and dive deeper, see the commonalities. But knowing that's kind of how you're thinking and going, and I'm excited about it. Like I say, I think that's what do you guys think? All right, let's find the commonality and put that as the next RFP, parallel, sequential, whatever. So I'm still excited. It's good to see how the process and stuff works, though, and figure it out, because all these chains are really different. We're all the same people, but they all function a lot different, This is cool.
Yeah, I think that's great. I don't know if Stephen may be in the channel, you might want to list, like a couple of bullets of like what Michael just said for next week's agenda. Daniel, would you be okay if we use part of next week for that and extend it to an hour?
Happy to do that. Yeah, so I'll extend it, and I'll make sure whatever bullet points Stephen prepares in the channel, I'll add it to the summary also for this week, and so everyone paying attention there can know what to expect for next week, and maybe we can continue. It seems that this is working. Today we've got, looking now, 14 people. We're up from 11 last week. I think 10 the week before. So the momentum seems to be collecting here.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I really like the feedback, and we will listen to it, and we will get better and improve.
Great. So any final thoughts? We're at the final minute of the hour. All right, maybe we can leave it there. And I'll check in on the, I guess, Stephen, you'll post your bullet points in the Antelope Leap upgrade Telegram channel. We may have to, actually, I was talking to Lovejoy about this. This meeting seems to have evolved a little bit. We're not so much a Leap upgrade call anymore.
Yeah.
It's almost more of like a node operator roundtable, or
you know you're in trouble when you get on the radar screen of the marketing department.
Wait, you have to have results. Wait, they need results.
You've been doing something wrong or something right.
And that's what I always say. I like the idea of the 15-minute, weekly. Let's manage EOS, figure out where it's at, give some directives to, the jungle VPs. Hey, we really want to test this. It's important to us from EOS standpoint. But I love these technical roundtable discussions. I think
Yeah.
we can get more people in. Half of it's figuring shit out, other half's
And
these.
do we keep it focused to like node operators? Or do we see this potentially evolving even beyond node, developer feedback, or maybe there's another forum for that?
Let's make a different forum for that. I'd like to keep this node operators and node upgrades, and because we'll use this one when we start to move to the next consensus upgrade and stuff. 3.2 is coming out, but it's you decide if you want to upgrade or not. There's no MSIG or big like countdown date. But I think this has been a really good slot that everyone knows. So I want to protect this time for node operators. And when we start to do more stuff for developers, which Steven's going to do the product management of, we'll have another meeting, and it might be at 9 on Thursdays. I don't know when it'll be, but we'll make that a separate one. And node operators are more than welcome to come to developer meetings.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I had the same thought. So we're aligned there. So look out for a rebrand of this meeting soon, and we'll see y'all next week to talk more about net plugin enhancements.
Great meeting. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
Cheers, everyone. Appreciate you all.